I watched my revenue shrink 90% literally between 2014 and probably the middle of 2015. And it was the longest, hardest, most emotionally impactful period of my entire life. I had a great team. I had like 12 people, I think, 11 or 12 people at the time. And I laid off, I want to say 7 of them. Yeah. I laid off 7 good people that didn't do anything wrong.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the MSP Pipeline. I'm your host, Kyle First, and today I'm joined by Jim Smith, the founder and CEO of Proper Sky. Jim's journey has taken him from the Peace Corps to building and scaling an MSP that's now focused on vertical growth, acquisitions, and one of the biggest opportunities in industry right now, CMMC compliance. And I just want to say, Jim, thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Kyle, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Of course. And Jim, before Proper Sky, before managed services, where did that entrepreneurship side of you come from?
It's funny. We were in an Evolve group years ago. Not years ago, it was probably last year. And the first question that our new facilitator had asked was like, hey, what was your first job? And they went around the room. Literally every single person was like, I was a DJ that I started a business. And I was like, my first job was like selling Cutco knives. And my first job was like all those jobs that are sort of like hard scrabble, like you want to kind of make it on your own. Mm-hmm. So for me, my first job was, I was probably 13, 14. I picked up a paper route. I had like 17 papers when it started. Then I had like 141 by the time I quit. I had to like push around a shopping cart to deliver it, So I guess that's where it started, I always just was fascinated by business and money and value and all things in between. So
I love it, man. And like you spent time in the Peace Corps, helping organizations solve tech problems in South Pacific, right? So what did that teach you that still impacts how you run a business today?
It's a really good question. I think one of the things that's really, really interesting is that just because managed services providers are good with technology doesn't make the business ever not about people. And so, I think one of the things I really loved about the Peace Corps was, one, I figured out I was good at this, and not just like a little bit good, but very good at it, right? And that I could probably make a living doing this thing. But I think of the Peace Corps, I got to help these really good organizations with very limited resources do something that they couldn't normally do without my help. And it was, just the planning and the building and all of it. I just fell in love with it. And so it's a reminder that like all this stuff that we do through technology really at the end of the day is about helping people, I guess. And I think that's the thing I really loved about the Peace Corps. It really gave me that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I completely understand. That's great that you actually did that type of thing. And when you came back to the US, started Proper Sky, did you always know you wanted to build a business, or were you just creating an opportunity for yourself?
It's interesting. So so before I joined the Peace Corps, I hooked up with this dude in one of my entrepreneurial studies class at Drexel University, which is where I went to school. Mm-hmm. And he was starting a business, and he was looking for a technology guy that could help dial into remote pharmacy systems and process prescriptions. And we built this whole business model around it and stuff like that. That plan never actually took off. So I got to be around a startup failure, which was totally enlightening, right? Like what it took, what it, kind of leadership and capital and stuff that it took to kind of put something like that together. So that was pretty informative. But the other thing is, when that job failed, I actually got a job with another organization that he was part of, and I kind of helped them with their servers. And I put an Exchange small business 4.5 server together and some other stuff. I'm dating myself now, and I worked there for a couple of years, and they helped me get through school and some other stuff. And I learned how to program and do some other things while I was there. But what I learned, probably the most important lesson, was like, I'm going to be sitting in a chair for the next 40 years of my life, right? So I better really enjoy what I'm doing in that chair or outside or whatever the hell the thing is. And so that gave me a perspective on like, okay, you get one shot at this. You know what I mean? There's some people that are going to sit in this chair for their entire lives and complain about it. There's other people that are going to look up at that clock, and that's how they measure their lives. And I was like, I never want to look up at a clock and feel like I'm not doing what I want to do when I want to do it, And so, yeah, so, I had that mantra. That's a big reason why I quit and I joined the Peace Corps. I was like, how can I go see the world with as little money as possible and, whatever. And then I fell in love with the service. When I came back, I was like, you know what? I'm really good at this. I enjoy doing it. There's an opportunity here to do this. And I was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I got a little bit of money in the bank. I don't have a job, no commitments, no kids, no, nothing to speak of. So let's give it a shot and see what turns up. And so I lucked out, man. There's a lot there to unpack.
Of course.
Yeah.
I definitely understand that. But like, what were those first few years actually like? Because a lot of people, it sounds exciting to do entrepreneurship, but most founders find it really difficult for those first couple of years. So what was it like for you?
Nobody talks like, it's like, oh, you don't know what it's like to make payroll. Like, there's all these like stereotypes. It's like, you don't know what it's like. I'm like, there's times where you're like, you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, your heart's racing. You're like, holy shit, all right, okay, I got a million things to do. Like there are these moments. A very close family member of mine started a business. He's been consulting for years and years, and we had a conversation. He's like, dude, I'm just tired. He's like, I spent a year grinding and doing everything that I can, and we're just not getting the traction. We're running out of capital, and then he got his first deal, right? Yeah. And that's the way that it goes, right? So for me, I was really lucky. So actually incredibly lucky in many ways. So when I got back from the Peace Corps, after I sort of like incorporated, got my paperwork together, which was incorrect and totally self-done, and I made a ton of mistakes there. I had a script that would read Craigslist, right? So 2005, 2006, Craigslist was all the hotness, and there's a bunch of small businesses posting on there looking for help and side gigs and stuff like that. And so I wrote a little Perl script. I think it would scrape the website and then basically text me if the word like Linux or server or Windows was in that. And literally, I think 3 of the first 4 calls that I made, they're still customers or relationships to this day. And so I've really built a lot of these like, composite situations, like the pieces necessary, I guess, to solve some of their problems. So he's like, hey, I'm going to buy you a plane ticket. So literally I got a ticket. The next day I flew down to Atlanta. I met the CEO and they cut me a check and they're like, here, go buy what you need. And I want you to recreate this data center and build it for us. And so that customer, we bought, their first purchase was 4 providers with 4 offices in Pennsylvania. And from like 2006, I want to say to about 2014, they grew to 70 providers, 60 offices in 13 states. Yeah, across the East Coast. Yeah, and so we managed all of it. Not all of it, most of it, the vast majority of it, right? So so that was fortunate, right? Yeah. But that's literally those were my first 3 customers. And crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. It really is. It really is.
I know, but I remember when we had our initial conversation, one of the defining moments in your story came when the company became heavily dependent on one client. How dangerous can that situation become?
So I think a very good friend of mine is in this situation right now. It's like they were growing so fast, I could barely keep up with the staffing that was required to support that client. And we had such a great relationship and everything was so, like I got to command all the technology. They trusted my decision making. I really just had to request budget and kind of prove that we were doing what we needed to do. I always kept costs lean. I had a team. You could tell us that, hey, we're buying a dermatology practice in 2 months. Mm-hmm. I would be out there in, a weekend. I'd do a walkthrough, and within 4 weeks, we'd have everything planned to do a cutover and all the work done so that we got everything shifted for all locations within a weekend, right? Like we ran a really tight ship. But you can't control the future of that organization. You have some control over yours, but you don't have control over your client situation. And so those 2 owners found out that they were doing each other dirty, to be honest with you. And so and that started part of it. There were some cash flow issues. A couple of high performing physicians were, jaded, left the organization, and they went out of business, man. So it was like a slow motion train wreck. I was just kind of caught in between 2 partners that I really respected, trying to figure out what the business was going to look like going forward, dissatisfied physicians that were leaving the group. And then the whole thing, I watched my revenue shrink 90% literally between 2014 and probably the middle of 2015. And it was the longest, hardest, like most emotionally impactful period of my entire life, and do not recommend. So, um, yeah, dude, like, I mean, there's still to these days, like, I had a great team. I had like 12 people, I think 11 or 12 people at the time. And I laid off, I want to say 7 of them. And I laid off 7 good people that didn't do anything wrong. But, things that I personally feel like I felt as a leader that I failed them, I got some advice from my dad at one point. He was like, look, dude, he's like, you everybody an opportunity, that's it. Right. And he said, you gave him an opportunity, didn't work out. That's the way life goes, and so it seems like such simple advice, but reflecting upon that, one more thing about that though, because of that failure, it made me a better business person. And like, as much as I hated going through it and all the trauma that came with it and sort of whatever, I'm a better human being, a better leader, and a better person as a result of it. But I do not recommend.
But so would you say that is the moment where you realize the way we're running the business has to change?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what was really super interesting about this is I kind of saw the writing on the wall, right? So the highest performing physician left this group, and I was like, man, that's going to have a big impact, right? I need to kind of man up, And so, but what was happening is they were losing clients faster than I could transition clients, right? And so I was feeling all bad about myself, right? So, and at the time we had purchased Lab Tech, which is what it was called at the time. And ConnectWise flew us down to a training seminar, and like I'm sitting in the classroom, and the guy's like, "All right, who's using the Lab Tech for ticketing?" And that was what I planned on using, which I've never in a million years. And everybody raised their hand and was like, "No, we're using ConnectWise." And I was like, "What the hell's ConnectWise?" Right? And they're like, "Oh, it's this other software." So they're like, "Look, we'll give you a free ticket to IT Nation. You should come and check out ConnectWise." And so I said, "All right." So as this was going down, I was going through all this emotional stuff. I flew down to Florida, and I was like, all right, let me figure out what's going on here. I walked into the room, and I was sitting there, actually at the bar, and this dude from a company up in Seattle sat down next to me, and we started talking. I was, woe is me, and he's, we're commiserating. He said, hey, listen, dude. He's like, there's this guy named Matt Zaroff. He runs a consulting company called Visionary 360. He taught me how to run a business, and I think he would help you figure out what managed IT services is. And I think he'd help you kind of transition into doing it the right way. And so, I was like, oh, okay. And the lesson I really took away from that is managed IT services was really a business model. It wasn't necessarily a solution, or, it solved a lot of the problems that you have from an hourly break fix and, being tethered to a single company. Because in a weird way, we were a managed services provider, but we really were attacking our hours. Then we were just charging, and then we were averaging it out and saying, hey, it's going to be X per month, right? And so we had a fixed fee contract, but it was very, very sort of back of the napkin math, So anyway, I came back and I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. All these sort of relationships that we built in the side, there was like an enterologist down the street and a foot doctor, and then there was like a couple nonprofits, and I was like, we're going to switch them all over to flat services contracts, and we're just going to do whatever we can. And so I picked up as many of those contracts as I could while these guys were going out of business. When it was done, I had a handful, and I think I was down to like 16 grand left in the bank. And then we finally got a nonprofit that was enough to carry the payroll, and we got a signed contract, and it was like, thank God. But at that point I was down to 4 employees, right? So 3 and myself, right? So tough.
It's crazy, man. Well, you made the shift toward recurring managed services, right? Yep. Why would you say that transition is so important?
It's so I used to feel, and there's still some of these dinosaurs out there that feel this way. It's like, like we just charge for what breaks and what fixes it, right? And that's good to an extent, right? But the problem is like, this is a great example. I had a customer, and we did a break fix project. We put a server in their office, right? And we said, hey, and at the time we gave them a tape backup because they didn't want to pay for cloud storage. And this was a long time ago. And we said, all right, here's your A volume, here's your B volume, here's a little fireproof safe. Make sure your office manager backs it up and does this, that, and the other thing. And they're like, yeah, okay, all right, great. And then we walk out the door, and we came back 3 months later, get a phone call, and the doctor's like, hey, something happened to the server, not really sure what's going on with it, and it's totally hosed. And I said, well, no problem. You've been making those backups like we taught you, right? Yep. And he's like, no, we haven't really been doing that, right? And so, like, well, look, now you've got a problem. right? Because you've got an obligation to protect that patient data, and so managed services at the time, and I still believe this too, if it's done well, creates a win-win situation, right? So there's a value to helping a business run effectively, so that technology is not in their face and it's just doing what it needs to do, right? So if your check-ins running humming right, and you're scanning cards and you don't have any blocks on the front desk, and that patient experience for a physician's office is so much better. If you're a nonprofit and you have different ways to sort of like make the transition from from one program into another and kind of automate all the paperwork and do all that sort of stuff, there's a value to that. And I think having that stuff run all the time without having to call tech support to slow people down, like that just creates a better, more seamless process. And so what I loved about managed services is like, and I understand this now that I run a slightly larger business, I want a system, I want a process that works, and I want it to be as out of the way as possible to reduce friction as much as I can, right? And I think managed services as a model really allows you to do that, right? It allows me as a provider to focus on the problems that you have when you need them, and to sort of make things easier for your organization.
Yeah, of course. And like growth is a huge thing in every industry. But one thing I found interesting is that referrals alone weren't enough for you, right? You started investing heavily into sales, marketing, SEO, inbound lead generation. When did you realize that word of mouth wasn't a complete growth strategy?
I'd say so, like 2015, 2016, when we kind of figured out like, okay, managed services is it. We spent 2 years really getting our service department. Okay, this is how we track time. These are projects. This is a fixed fee agreement. These are the types of agreements we sell. You get all that stuff kind of figured out. And operationally, you're like, okay, I got this thing. I can do this, right? All right, cool. And then I'm just sitting there waiting for people to sort of like send me referrals, right? And like, it's a very long, boring wait sometimes, right? You can't forecast them. It's very difficult. And so around 2016, 2017, I really sat down and I was like, how do I buy? Right. If I'm looking for a new accountant and I'm just fresh, what's the process that I go through to find these people, right? And so referrals is part of it, right? But if I have something that nobody else has a service or solution for, what's the process? And at the time I was like SEO, right? I mean, really, I want to find a company that like really understands it. So 2017, 2018, I really leaned into marketing. I actually redid, with the help of subcontractors. This wasn't totally all me, but like I kind of had this vision of how I want the site to go. So I spent a lot of time with copywriters. I spent a lot of time figuring out what the site needed to accomplish. I figured out how I wanted different customers to experience it, like what they read, right? There's so many websites that you go to, and it's like just TLA vomit. You're like, BDR, Knox, SOX, and it's just trashed all over the place. And it's like, okay, customers don't care about that, right? What they care about is outcomes, and that they can trust that you're able and capable of doing the work that needs to be done, right? And so I really went at that. There was a book at the time, They Ask You Answer, right? And I think that book was pretty profound. And then Story Brand was another one that was a pretty good book at the time. And I don't know when I read both of those things, but like around that time, I was like, this is definitely the way to sort of build the system. So anyway, I focused on that, and I started writing high quality content. I started focusing on, one of the things that I read somewhere was like, if you Google an answer and the first result sucks, that's an opportunity to improve it, right? And so I did. Like, if you Google Winlock to this day, I think I'm number 3. I couldn't figure out how to turn the Winlock key off, and I was like, all these articles suck. Let me just write an article. I mean, and that really, that little article alone, I was getting, I want to say like 15,000 visits a day to my website at one point. Like, it was crazy. Yeah. And so, but that really, all that juice and energy and juju, like, marketing is a long game, but that inbound, it was cool. And all of a sudden I'd come back, and then suddenly on a random Wednesday, there'd be 2 leads. And then on a Thursday, there'd be a good lead. And it's like, oh, this is awesome. Right. And so like, it's working, and I'm not out there banging the pavement or, sitting in some sort of the tip group begging for begging for leads.
No, yeah, of course. And as founders grow their companies, right, they eventually they hit a point where they eventually stop being the person that does everything. And I was wondering, when does that happen to you actually?
I think it's probably a very similar story and a very similar size, right? So I think some owners are better and more detailed at it, right? So and it depends on the type of owner. I think IT more so in particular than other organizations or industries tends to be run from an engineering perspective. So you get some guys that are super, super sophisticated operators that really can lean into the technology and the operation and do that piece, right? I'm not one of those people. I wouldn't. I don't know if I have ADHD, but I'm like that dog from Up. Yeah, squirrel. You're like constant, you know. And so it's really hard to scale a business when the guy leading the charge is chasing squirrels, right? I think, you know, the first thing for me anyway, and this is my opinion, the first thing that has to happen in your journey is you got to be able to hand off the service, right? So you got to have somebody that understands the technology, cares about the customers as much as you do, and you got to be able to hand it off to them and say, here's the systems that we built, here's the way that things are supposed to operate, here's the expectations that our clients have, go to town. I think when you do that, that's the first thing that happens. And then inevitably sales, you know, IT people are like, well, I hate talking to human beings, you know, so I'm going to spend I'll figure out how to get this sales thing kind of whacked. The other thing that happens along the way too, and this is probably around employee 5 or 6, you know, you end up getting some sort of administrative help. Mm-hmm. So most owners I know have some sort of like bookkeeping, finance person, some sort of third-party service that helps with that piece. So, but yeah, I think 10 is a critical piece to that. And then I think you can kind of grow and add ancillary services on. I think you can actually start to do QBR. I think you can start to do account management in a way. I think you can start to do marketing independently without you. And you kind of fill these other roles around the organization as the service grows up. But you reach a certain point where like you're making all the decisions. At least this was my experience. This may not be the case for other people, but I had a difficult time delegating.
Yeah.
Big challenging time delegating. And so learning how to let go and spend more time hiring the right people was really the most profound change, right? And so anyway, I think 10 people, 20 people, 40 people is probably like, once you get to those thresholds, I think there's an evolution that happens organically.
Definitely. And like when you made those right hires, how much did that change the business?
Oh my God, man. So I was super fortunate. Honestly, like the best decision I've ever made in business was hiring my right-hand man, Rob Lefebvre, and not hiring, really, he's a partner, honestly. So what we're putting together, I'm really proud of. I was struggling with getting some finance numbers together, and I said, hey, can you help my CFO? She's struggling, you know, maybe help me figure out what's going on. Like, why can't we get this information in the way that we need it? I sat up and I met with this woman named Janine. Janine sat down with me and she was like, hey, listen, you need an integrator. You are at a point now where your organization is not going to grow any further until you get somebody that actually knows how to run a business in here to run a business, right? And so I was like, you know, what's that cost? You know, you know, I don't know if I can afford it. I'm pretty good, you know. And she said, okay, all right. So I'm still going to introduce you to this guy, and I you know, whatever. I'll see what I can find. She went back and she introduced me to this guy, Rob, and you know, I was like, I'm not really sure why you're here, Rob, but yeah, come on down, take a look, you know. And we just really hit it off, man. We really hit it off. And he's like, look, dude, I see what you want to build here, right? And he's like, I know exactly what I can do to help you. And this excites me. He's like, I think you and I combined, we can build something great together, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah, and we are, dude. We're building something fantastic right now.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that, man. And like, you know, today Proper Sky has a strong presence in healthcare, right? Nonprofits, architecture, engineering, construction. But one area you're particularly excited about is CMCC. Yes. For those unfamiliar, why is that such a significant opportunity?
There are 310,000 listed subcontractors that can do business with the federal government in the sort of supply chain. And so CMMC had finally released all of their specs and guidance for what the levels are and then what the expectations are. And whether you're selling buttons on camouflage or you're putting missiles into javelins, like every single one of those organizations has to be CMMC compliant in some sort of way, shape, or form, right? And I think there's only 600 CPO3s or CPOs to do 310,000 organizations. And so getting these organizations to actually finally pay attention to the compliance and regulations, and then to actually get them ready so that they can be vetted and approved to be a approved contractor. it's going to be a monumental lift, and the time is right now. And so we're bullish on it. We think that the defense industrial base it could use good quality managed services, and we feel like it's a huge opportunity right now for the MSP industry.
Yeah, and when did you basically try to get into it? Was it recent or?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of lifting in this space, right? So really compliance and really understanding like how you can deliver values for those clientele is a hugely important piece of this. So we had a couple of other government subcontractors to the government, and we did an okay job, but not a great job. And so now we're getting a chance to go back and really tighten up our ship. And now that the guidelines are published and you have clear guidance on what needs to be done, internally, we're spending a lot of time and energy making sure that we're CMMC compliant so that we can better serve this potential customer base that we're going after.
Definitely. And over the next 5 years, what changes do you think will separate growing MSPs from ones that might struggle?
So I am so bullish on AI. It is going to absolutely positively transform this industry. It is the most powerful technology and most capable technology I have ever put my hands on in my entire life. Like it is, I feel like, Doctor Strange, like a sorcerer, man. I watched this thing, I went to, and I find myself getting upset at Claude. And I'm like, you know what? Let's pump the brakes. Claude just wrote 5,000 lines of code for you in about 16 minutes, and 99% of it works. It may not be exactly the way that you want, but let's give them a high five and take a breather. So I mean, right now we're in the infancy stages, right? And this is the way that Google was it had a lot of bugs when it first rolled out, but it transformed search. Right now, people expect super high quality, and oh my God, man! Like so the original question is, what's going to separate the MSPs here? It's going to be AI. Yeah. And this isn't just, oh, I bought this tool that has AI baked in, or I'm waiting for my PSA to tell me how to use AI. Like that's not the power of AI, right? Like the power of AI is you can build a cathedral of knowledge, processes, systems, and integrations that is uniquely your own, that gives you a competitive advantage at a scale that's unfathomable, right? Yeah. Like it's just simply amazing, right? And so there's obviously governance and data protection and some of the stuff that comes with those guardrails, but there's also this ability to sort of build incredible things that help your people do real meaningful work and get back to human to human interaction. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what the model is going to look like as we continue to move forward. I do see, I mean, there's two things I think will definitely happen. It's going to get more human. There's going to be this swing back to, humanity, right? Absolutely positively, because there's going to be a value, I think, that comes out of like us reconnecting and figuring out what we are as a species. I hope anyway. I think that's going to definitely be a natural occurrence, right? But I also think that automation and a lot of this stuff is going to go super speed. Yeah. It's going to happen way faster than I think anybody's ready, and also slower too. So
we'll say, I guess, right? But let's talk about a little bit more Proper Sky, right? You have a very ambitious vision to grow Proper Sky into a $50 million organization. Why set a goal that large?
Because 10x is easier than 2x, right? So at the time we were like kind of struggling between 4 to 5 million, and I read that book, 10x is better than 2x, by whatever the heck the guy's name is. And, I was like, you know what? I can do this, right? So why, I think a lot of MSPs, they put on these blinders and they look down and they look at the box and they're like, okay, what's broken with the box?
Yeah.
Let me turn a few screws here. Let me turn a few screws there. Let me do this, let me do that. And so you start to operationalize and you drive efficiencies inside the box. But that doesn't scale, right? And it becomes so difficult, like you reach a threshold where you can't manage all the screws, right? And so it's like, okay, well, if we were a 10 times bigger business, what kind of clientele would we need? What kind of markets would we go after? What kind of people would we hire? What kind of partners do I want to work with? Right. So how do we go to market? Like, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Like, what are the things that we build, as a team? Like, what can we do to deliver value in the marketplace?
Yeah.
Right. And so that excites me.
Yeah.
It gets me up and it gets me out. Like, I want to help 10,000 people, right? So like, for a lot of IT companies, it's oh yeah, hey, we got this many endpoints and we closed this many tickets. Like, I don't want to say that, man. I want to know that I helped 10,000 people. It's a great story, right? So one of my clients is a nonprofit. I love them. We've been doing business for 13 years, and they've really seen some dark times come through, and they've really succeeded. They had a woman there, right? She was part of this program called Generations, and she was in a homeless shelter. Her mom had kind of abandoned her. Her father, was out of the picture. Her mom had become, a drug addict. She had nowhere to go. She got thrown out of her house. She had a new baby. She had nowhere else to go. So she ends up in this program. She lived at this location for a couple of years. She leaves. She graduates. She gets a better life. She goes, gets her own apartment, and whatever. Well, fast forward, she ends up coming back to the organization, getting hired. And then she gave a speech, and she talked about the impact that this place had on her, and the changes that happened in her life. And then she points over to her son, and she's like, and he's going to college in the fall. And this is the boy that was with me 18 years ago. And this is a testament to the power of what can happen when you work with a great organization, right?
Awesome. Very powerful.
None of that has, yeah, exactly. None of that has anything to do with IT, except for 13 years of that journey. We replaced the keyboards, made sure the internet was working, made sure the front door and the door locks were good, and that the phones were good, and like all the little stuff, right? And it doesn't mean anything in that moment until you take a step back and you realize, like, we helped a really good organization help people that needed help, right? And it's like that for all of IT, man. That's what I love about this thing. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I know. I get it. So you got to deal with this person. She's pissed off that the insurance cards aren't scanning. But you know what, man? That's a 95-year-old woman with cancer on her face that's going in for a surgery. That's somebody's mom and daughter, right? And so we're helping these physicians deliver slightly better service just in the smallest way possible that makes their lives better, right? And like, for me, that is fulfilling. And I want to do that for as many human beings as I can through what I consider my language of love, which is technology, right? And not just me. That's just the organization I want to build. We're all building this, right? So, people over profits, dude. And I think if you go with that mantra, like, nothing can stop you.
Of course, and that's awesome, man. It's very touching, actually. But when you picture Proper Sky 8 years from now, what does it look like?
So for me, like this, there's this vision, and I say, so ultimately what I'd love to do. So right now we're building out a 24/7 service, right, to do help desk. And so that's to really get our clients that are calling us. So two reasons. One is quality of life.
Yep.
We've had a very difficult time getting people here in the States to want to commit to nighttime shifts and stay overnight. And it's just hard, and it's a hard way to live, So we figured by partnering up with some overseas people, and some other organizations, we can provide 24/7 service. So ultimately, our plan is to do 24/7, fully owned eventually, but we'll see however we get to that. And then I'd love to have I'd like to do 3 acquisitions in the next 8 years.
Okay.
High quality acquisitions of organizations, like-minded organizations, appropriate cultural connection, same sort of growth goals and ambitions, that are really dedicated to helping people. But I'd like to really sort of tranche out what we do into 4 separate verticals. I'd love to be able, like, Proper Sky for Good, that sort of verticalizes a nonprofit organization. The second one would be Proper Sky for Builders, that really helps construction, architects, builders. Proper Sky for Defense, helping people get through the CMMC and compliance piece. Yep. And then Proper Sky for Health, which is sort of like the healthcare component, right? So sort of helping, physician groups or behavioral health companies, things along those lines, really deliver exceptional service to their clientele.
Yeah, that's great. This is a great game plan right there. I promise you that.
I hope so. Yeah.
I hope so as well, man. And this is how we normally end our podcast, right? We end it with one last question. If you could sit down with the version of yourself that was just starting Proper Sky, before the growth, before the setbacks, before the lessons, what advice would you give them?
Jokingly, but not jokingly, buy NVIDIA. little bit from Back to the Future too there. So no, honestly, what would I tell myself 10 years? Who, not what, right?
Oh.
I think it's such a simple statement, but really I've learned more from this last couple of years of hires,
Yeah.
and like the importance of really spending the time to get people who do the job better than you,
Yeah.
that believe what you believe, and that want what you want, right? Like that's how you build a team, and that's how you make things better for everybody, right?
Definitely.
So I think I would spend a hell of a lot less time telling people what to do and hiring people that knew what to do and letting them tell me why they were doing it. Yeah.
All right, that's great advice right there. And Jim, I just want to say once again, thank you again for being here today. You're building something great over at Proper Sky. I'm excited to see the growth that you guys are going to have in the future, as well as the culture that you're bringing on. You know, you seem like you have a great group of peers around you, which is awesome to hear. And then once again, I just want to say thank you again for being here today.
Kyle, I'm honored. Thanks for having me on the podcast, man. And I appreciate what you're doing. And yeah, so whatever I can do to help the pipeline grow,